everyone. Welcome to the Across the Park podcast. As you can see from the banner at the bottom, this is a specific show about the announcements or pending announcements, if it ever happens, of Sean Dyche being appointed Everton manager. Myself, Judgy and Pricey, going to bring the news to you. We're going to talk about, I guess, the implications of the appointments and what it maybe means for the way forward for the rest of the season, and the interesting next few days of the transfer window closing, and you know, what that might mean to Everton. Considering the other news that we'll be discussing will be the departure of Anthony Gordon to Newcastle for a reported, well, unreported, but suggested £45 million, or you know, somewhere in that ballpark. So anyway, Pricey, Sean Dyche, Everton manager. I know I don't necessarily need to ask you whether you're happy with it. I know you are.
I am, yeah. I am happy with it. He's someone I've liked Sean Dyche. I liked Sean Dyche for a while. I think what he'd done at Burnley was exceptional. You got to look at it relative to what Burnley are and how much money they bring in, and what the budget is, and what type of players they have, and what he actually done with them, taking them into Europe for a season, keeping them in the Premier League for many years, and obviously took them down but brought them straight back up again when he did take them down, and potentially could have kept them up last season at Everton's detriment if he would have stayed. So I think he's a good appointment. I think, even though it sounds like we've landed on him because Bielsa didn't want the job, or because Bielsa put terms in that we didn't want to agree to, I think it's a sense. So we might have fell on it when potentially it was second choice, but I think it's a really sensible appointment from Everton's point of view. I think we've got a manager there who can come in and hopefully bring a bit of stability and a bit of discipline on the field as well. And we mentioned earlier, I mentioned in earlier podcast about Lampard not being quite pragmatic enough and not being a manager who is just happy not to lose a game rather than going to win it all the time. And I think Dyche will recognise from past experience and the way he sets up and be pragmatic in the fact that he doesn't have to win every game. He can take a point where needed, and he can set us up to be harder to beat, essentially. So I'm happy. I think it's a good. I do think, as I say, it's a really sensible appointment from Everton.
Yeah, I agree. I think the word sensible is definitely an apt one in this case. I can't say I'm excited about it, but everyone who's asked me about it so far, because I mean, slightly amusing for our listeners or viewers. Millsy and Mike, who's a friend of the show, recorded this Sean Dyche being appointed show 3 or 4 days ago, expecting the club to announce it, you know, maybe late on Friday, early on Saturday. We're now on Monday at midday, and Everton, which is pretty typical Everton, to be honest, at this moment in time, still haven't announced the appointments, and Sean Dyche is at the training ground and his team are taking training. So it's crazy. But going back to that, I think it's the right appointment for this moment in time. I absolutely can't disagree with that at all. And you know what? It might be the medium to long-term appointments. It feels a little bit like when we appointed David Moyes in place of Walter Smith, where nobody had any bad blood towards Walter Smith. He was working under very difficult circumstances at the time, Walter Smith, and obviously we've since found out through some of our own shows and through various ex-players who spoke about it, that he'd done a better job than we maybe ever realised. Whether we look back at Lampard in the same vein, I'm not so sure. But I think when David Moyes come in, maybe he wasn't coming in with the same reputation as Dyche did, because Dyche, as you said, has been in the Premier League, has worked under tough constraints, but has got results in the Premier League under those constraints as well. But it does feel a little bit like that, doesn't it? You know, it's someone coming in who we kind of know what we're going to get.
Yeah,
and it's going to be interesting to see how some of the players respond to that.
Absolutely, and I think it's a bit of a reality check for fans as well. Not all fans, but some fans who are expecting a marquee manager to come in each time and sort of take us forward. We need to realise where we are at this stage. I think in hindsight, Lampard, I think Everton brought Lampard in expecting us to climb out of relegation quite easily last season and to push on this season to mid-table, to top half of the table. When that doesn't happen, you realise that Lampard's probably not the correct manager in hindsight. And if we knew we were struggling, perhaps a Sean Dyche type appointment, obviously not at the time, but it's that type of appointment we probably needed last season as well. But the fact that they've recognised it and brought him in this time round, it is similar to the Moyes one in terms of just stabilising us, just making sure, just keeping us in the Premier League to start with, stabilise us on and off the pitch, maybe work with players who who don't have the quality that we'd like them to have. But he's used to managing those type of players. I mean, Moyes came from Preston with players who obviously weren't as good as Everton players at the time. But Everton players weren't as good as the average Premier League team. So it was a case of working with what he's got. And I think that's what Dyche will do. He'll see what he's got and he'll work and cut his cloth accordingly to what he's got in the squad, rather than trying to implement a system on the players that's not going to work. Pragmatic. And I think that's exactly what Moyes was. That's what Dyche is. And he'll take, if Dyche does stay for a while, it'll take, some clever business in the transfer market to push on. But again, he's used to doing that on a budget like he did at Burnley.
I mean, before we come on to potential additions in the transfer market, I'm not going to ask you for individual names, by the way. I'm probably just going to talk positions, and some of them a little bit more obvious than others. One of the reports that's come out is that apparently, and you'd expect this really, that Dyche in his interview, his big message was that there are clearly a number of players in the Everton squad that are underperforming. Some of those players he's worked with before, and he feels like he's got a few quick fixes almost to kind of patch those players up and maybe get them playing a little bit better. You'd imagine he's referring to the likes of Michael Keane and Dwight McNeil. What are your feelings on those comments, and where do you think in particular he can maybe make some or gain some easy wins out of this squad?
I think defensively, we're giving away too many cheap goals and easy goals, and I think he'll tighten that right up. I don't think the personnel is wrong as defensively. I think we've got decent defenders: Cody, Tarkowski, Godfrey. I'd be a bit surprised if Keane came back into it. I know what you're saying. He's worked with Keane and got
I'm not surprised if it's devastated to him.
Yeah, but I wouldn't expect Keane to come in and be a replacement for what we've got. I think it's just a case of tightening up as a team. Not just only the defensive line, but as a team, tighten up and not giving away those easy goals, which I think he'll do. And as I said before, discipline on the field, I think he'll bring into it. Hopefully, he'll get the best out of the players who are underperforming.
Yeah, sorry, Tarkowski, by the way, I forgot to mention that. That's probably the most significant one. I'd like to think he's referring to Tarkowski rather than Keane. But yeah,
I'd hope so. But as I said, I don't think the personnel needs to change defensively. It's just a case of be pragmatic and tightening up and not giving away silly goals and set pieces. I think set pieces, we're not very good at defending set pieces at the moment, and he'll hopefully bring in, whether he's got a set piece coach or whether it's himself, and tighten up that area and just make sure we're not giving away goals. First of on the first and second balls off set pieces, we seem to lose a lot where the first ball's got in, it gets knocked down, and the second balls we're always second to second balls. And it's stuff like that he'll tighten up and just give us that overall discipline.
Just on that note, do you think it helps him that he's got two fixtures coming up that the fans and everyone else will be expecting us not only to lose it, but to be without the ball for long periods, to be just kind of sitting back and soaking it up and trying to win set plays. Arsenal and Liverpool, not necessarily Liverpool, because that Liverpool team obviously is not the Liverpool team that it has been over the last few years, but certainly Arsenal, coming to Goodison at the weekend, there's no two ways about it in terms of how we're going to approach that game. Do you think that helps? Not necessarily, results. You want to get a win, don't you? But
yeah, I know what you're saying. He can come in, can't he? And he can say, right, this is what we're doing. He's done that before with Burnley, hasn't he? And that's how he. I mean, I was watching it. It's going around the internet. The tactics he's done against how he beat Liverpool at Anfield. It's that sort of setup that we'll be hoping to implement against those teams like Arsenal. So yeah, I think he can come in with a blueprint, if you like. He's got the blueprint for how to perform against those teams, or how to defend, or how to work against those teams to try and get results. And I think that, in a way, that'll help him, because he can just come in and roll that out straight away for those first two games and maybe build up a bit of a base. Obviously, if we get beat in those two games, he's on the back foot straight away, isn't he? But I think he's probably got a pass on those. Not a pass, that's the wrong thing to say, but you know what I mean?
Not against Liverpool, but certainly,
against
certainly
Arsenal, yeah. So I think that might help him, but coming out of those games, he's got to get results, hasn't he? That's the end of the day. He's got to get results. Maybe not against Arsenal, but he's got to get results going into the season. We're in a terrible position, but looking at the league, it only takes a couple to get us out of there, and that's what he'll be hoping for.
100%. Well, listen, we'll move on slightly. We don't want this to be our normal show, but we are going to touch on things given the time. And Anthony Gordon's departure to Newcastle, which again was another one we were just expecting to be announced. was announced formally yesterday and was kind of informally announced on Saturday. Just briefly, thoughts on that?
I think it's a good deal for Everton. I think 40 million there or thereabouts.
40 rising to 45, yeah.
I think it's a good deal for Everton. It allows us to have some money to go into the transfer market. We've been linked with a couple of wingers and a forward this morning. So you want to look at the papers. So that, I suppose we wouldn't have been linked with those, or wouldn't have the opportunity to buy those if it weren't for Gordon leaving. And I don't think he's going to be a particularly big miss either.
No, and that's it, isn't it? It's not like, you know, and there was a degree of the fans being split on the Richarlison leaving, as in half of the fans being, oh, I'm not sure we're going to miss him that much. The other half thinking, you know, I think we will miss him massively. It's not that loss, is it? Do you know what I mean? You know, we're talking about a player who's, I think it was scored 7 and assisted 5 or 6 in 70 games. He's still relatively, you know, a youth player, isn't he? He hasn't really established himself despite the early promise, and obviously the goals and assist return isn't something that the team are relying on.
No, exactly. He's a bit of a nice to have for Everton at the minute, isn't he? He's not like a guaranteed starter. It's someone who can come in. I think he'll be a decent player in the future. I'm not having a go at him as a player. I think he will be decent under the right coaching, the right guidance. I think he can really thrive. But for us at this stage of where we are, I think the money is more important than having Anthony Gordon in the team or in the squad. And as I say, as long as we can reinvest that into something into players that can get us out of this situation, then it looks like a good deal for us.
On that one, then, and again, I'm not going to ask you to name personnel because there's so many players being linked, and also there's I guess there's a lot of permutations to that. What type of players? I guess how many first, and it's almost the same question. And in what positions would you like to see us strengthen?
Priority-wise, we need a big forward, I think, who's going to either play with Calvert-Lewin or challenge Calvert-Lewin. And then we need a winger, at least one winger. If you have to buy 2 players, with you know, they'd be the 2 areas that I think, as I say, the defence and the midfield can be coached better. And I've said that on previous podcasts. They can be coached better to perform better. But going forward and scoring goals is a massive problem because the quality is just not there. So I'd like to see us bring in a number 9 and a winger, an out winger who can take a man on and cross a ball, basically.
Yeah, I think that obviously the 2 key metrics being assists and goals, they're the 2 things that Gordon wasn't giving us, and unfortunately, the 2 things that our current forwards aren't giving us either. So yeah, I agree with you. I think we definitely need, and that's the tricky thing, isn't it? We're almost looking at like the signings that Allardyce made, you know, a few years ago, where he bought Walcott and Tosin in. And although they were not great signings for the club over the long term, they did have that instant impact. You know, Tosin scored goals. You know, he scored a few key goals. I think it was one at Huddersfield away. There was a couple at Goodison. Walcott, you know, made a bit of an impact as well. It's tricky, isn't it? Because you do need those types of signings, but then they're the signings that end up kind of hemorrhaging you over the next few years. So it's going to be a tough balance to strike, I think.
And that comes down to negotiating on what type of deals you're putting in place for them. It's difficult because we're not going to attract top quality. Well, we're not going to attract top quality players. It's going to be that level of player that we need to bring in, and that's why go back to Dyche being the correct appointment, because he's worked with those type of players before who perhaps haven't got the quality. I know he's worked with good players as well, and he definitely has. But he's got the best out of players who maybe aren't at that top echelons of the Premier League, and if he can do that, then perfect. But yeah, it depends on the deals you bring in. We need, if it's a couple of loans till the end of the season and then we regroup again, fine with me. Or if it's short-term deals, or what we don't want to be doing is throwing money at players to come and sign for us, which is what we've done in the past. But I think it's interesting who we can get, and it's lowering expectations as a club and a fan base again, and just saying realistically, who can we get in, who's going to improve us, and maybe players who aren't getting a game in other clubs or who are at lesser teams, and we have to bring them in. The Coventry striker, for example, would be a good example of that. It's given a chance to a Championship player who looks decent in the Championship but's never performed in the Premier League. There's them type of players we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, and I think from Dyche's point of view, you would imagine that in terms of him being a manager that's unemployed at the moment, he will have probably been looking at the Championship as much as looking at the Premier League in terms of staying current. You know, he'll probably be half expecting offers to come from the Championship as much as the Premier League. This is probably as good a job as he could have expected to get at this moment in time. But going back to targets and maybe where players are coming from, it probably gives me a bit more assurance that we've got a manager who probably knows that league quite well because he's probably been spending a lot of time looking and making sure that he's current with it. Last one for me, and I don't think it's an obvious one. It probably depends on the players you bring in. Do you expect to change the system, or do you still maybe expect us to stick with the back three, over the next few weeks, or back five?
I'd probably expect us to. I mean,
he's a back four man, isn't he? Typically tight, isn't he? But then the personnel.
Yeah, I mean, he's it depends. I don't know, is the honest answer. You think he might come in and go, right, it's worked well as a 3-5-2 or 3-5, 3-5-2 or whatever you want to call it. Three at the back. Yeah. It's been it's worked when Everton have performed better against the top teams. It's worked that way. So let's just get them playing that way as best we can, knowing the personnel we've got, and then maybe when you get the players in who we want, you can change the system a little bit, maybe. But I think I don't know. It's a tough one to call because he might just want to come in straight away. As I said before, when he was doing those, he's won against Liverpool in the past. He's done it in a different way, and he might want to come in and just put that on straight away, and that's what he knows. It's tough. I don't know. Is the honest answer.
Yeah, you're right. Obviously, over the next couple of days, it's the transfer window closes tomorrow night. Again, we're recording midday Monday, so I think we'll have a better idea over who we bring in and maybe what the system looks like. I think for me, it's probably going to look like a 4-5-1, or as we say, almost a 5-4-1 at the weekend against Arsenal. It'll be about closing gaps in the midfield, in between the lines, or trying to maybe push them down the wings and getting crosses in, as opposed to letting them get through the thirds. I think that'll be the priority on Saturday. But again, this was just a quick show to announce that the incoming new manager, Sean Dyche, and obviously best of luck to him from the Everton fans. I think it's a massive job. It's a really important time. I think he's got enough time for me to be able to not only put a stamp on it, but to maybe to get enough points to get us over the line. But yeah, I think it's the right appointment. I think on reflection from my point of view, regardless of who we were linked with or who we could have got, I think there's only so many managers out there who could probably work under the constraints, is probably the right word, and also deal with some of the outside pressures as well. It's interesting. I think that's an interesting one for me. He seems like a very tough character, and he's obviously thick-skinned in terms of some of the criticism he's had from the media in the past, and maybe the way he's been stigmatised. But it's a different pressure, isn't it, coming to Everton, and a club like Everton, where the expectations instantly are, as you said, sometimes wrongly, are for us to be competing on a weekly basis and to maybe be playing a brand of football that he maybe hasn't always been required to produce.
Yeah, well, I said that about players as well. Coming to Everton, it's a different type of pressure. And it's a massive, compared to what he's had before, it's a massive challenge for him. But it's one that he, as you said before, he might have been considering championship clubs that have come in for him. So it's a massive opportunity for him as well, with a big club, that if he does get it right, he's got, going into the new stadium, well, he's got a massive club on his hands if he can get it right. He'll know that, and he'll come in and let's see if he's got it. Let's see if he's got it. It sounds like from the way he speaks, I think he speaks really well. It sounds like he'll take it in a stride, and as you say, come in with that tough attitude and maybe a bit of discipline that's needed across the whole club.
Absolutely. Okay, well, listen, thanks everyone for listening. Again, it was a quick show from us. We'll have another one coming out during the week, which we hopefully have the chance to reflect on the incomings. Hopefully no more outgoings, except for maybe a few I can think of. But it'll certainly give us a better idea of what we're looking at for the weekend. So again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you all soon.